Join us today as we hear the story of two of the people behind the Pride Camping Association. Amanda and Davin share their mission, reflect on successes and some hurdles along the road, and of course, how the pandemic has shifted all of this. Building an organization from the ground up is no easy feat, so grab a cup of coffee or a cold glass of water, get comfy, and join us. Welcome to Beyond Camp, where we explore the intersection of camp in our lives. For too long, camp professionals have referred to camp as being in a bubble, and we're here to burst that bubble with you today. We know that camp intersects with every aspect of our lives. We're excited to delve into those. We are your hosts, Rachel Kent. My pronouns are she, her.
And I'm Cassie Bloy. My pronouns are also she, her.
We're here to go beyond camp with you. As a reminder, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening today. Be sure to check out the show notes at gocamp.pro/beyondcamp. Now, let's get started. Today, we are so excited to be chatting with Amanda and Davin from the Pride Camping Association. Amanda, when they are not busy with the Pride Camping Association, is the manager of member risk at the Girl Guides of Canada. Amanda holds an MA in interdisciplinary studies in applied psychology and education, women's studies, and sociology. They have over 25 years of experience in the camping and youth development field and have held leadership positions in camping across Canada. Davin is a supervisor of healthy child development for the YMCA of Greater Vancouver, and Davin has completed his HBA in sociology, focusing particularly on gender and youth studies. Having worked at summer camp for 2S LGBTQ plus and allied youth in Ontario, Davin saw the need for many other camps to embrace the same sense of inclusion and acceptance to ensure 2S LGBTQ plus campers are being offered a safe, barrier-free, and traditional camp experience. Welcome, Amanda and Davin. We're so excited to have you both here today. So
Thank you.
So we like to start every episode by asking folks both where they identify or how they identify and where they feel they carry privilege. And we do this for a couple of reasons. One, because we love to get to know our guests, but secondly, because we really want to normalize the idea of talking about identity and talking about privilege and having it become more of our day-to-day language. So Amanda, I'm going to turn to you first. I would love if you could share a few ways with our listeners that you identify and where you feel you might carry some privilege.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. So as Rachel said, I'm Amanda. I use they, them pronouns, and I identify as queer and genderqueer. I carry a particular privilege in terms of being a white settler on Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, and Algonquin land. I also carry an incredible amount of privilege in that both of my parents have post-secondary degrees. They both have master's degrees, and university and like access to education was always never a question. And I was financially secure enough to be able to know that I could go to university without having to work full time. So that I think is two of the ways that I carry a fair bit of privilege. Also, being genderqueer, I can pass quite easily as female, although I really don't like to do it. But for safety's sake, it's something that is possible.
Thanks so much for sharing, and I appreciate your insight into privilege. I think what's fascinating when we have guests on is all the different ways that they see the world and interact with the world. So thank you for sharing that. Davin, I'll turn to you next.
Wonderful. Yeah, so my name is Davin Allan. I use he, him pronouns. I identify as a queer man, but also as a white abled settler. I definitely experience privilege in many realms. Being a white person that is male expressing, again, being a settler, I am on unceded traditional territory of the Stolo Nation. And similar line of thought as Amanda, I think something in particular in terms of my career in camping, I think I really was only able to get to this sort of position based on my family and my upbringing. And, I think there's a lot of people who would love to pursue this type of work, but financially or for whatever reason, they're not able to do that. Some people aren't able to work at summer camp every summer because they need a better paying job. And that is not an option for everybody, and that is something that I was definitely privileged with and has really brought me to where I am today.
Thanks so much, Davin. Yeah, Cassie and we've talked several times about the importance of paying people livable wages because it is a privilege to be able to work for not very much money.
And to piggyback off something Davin said as well, like not only do we feel like financially able to work at camp, but we saw ourselves reflected in the staff at camp, at least in terms of racialized groups. So we could look at the group of staff around and be like, oh, I could fit here, in a way that I don't think is true for a lot of people.
Very true.
So true. Thank you so much for sharing. It's just, I love every intro of this when I hear a different way of how people identify. And I think Amanda's addressing how education was part of that privilege, and it was just, part of their family. And I want to thank you for sharing that, because I think it opened my eyes to being like, hey, yeah, that's something that we need to consider. But I think we wanted to start diving in and talking more about the Pride Camping Association. So, what was your overall vision for the Pride Camping Association when you got started on this project? I'm not sure who wants to take it first, because I don't know the story completely of where you got started.
Yeah, sometimes I look back and I think, did we have a vision? Like we did. So we're are we 3 years old now, Davin? I can't remember.
Oh yeah, December 2018 is when we started.
So December 2018 was when we launched our website and were incorporated as a nonprofit in Canada. So when I think about my camp career, I think about the fact that when I was privileged enough to be able to be sent to camp, and privileged enough to continue working at camp, like financially that was an option. I also have a fair bit of privilege at camp. I talk about a lot being lucky at camp. So when I was about 19, the director of the camp I was working at told my supervisor that I needed to stop talking about being gay, or they would fire me. And my supervisor told them to shove it, basically, and then came and pulled my friend and I aside and said, just so you know, the camp director made this threat. I've told them it's not appropriate. I've told them I'll support if you make a complaint to the Human Rights Tribunal or Council against you, and just so you know, it's happening, but I'm not okay with it. So that was incredibly lucky that at that time in a province where I didn't really, it was kind of a gray area whether it had legal protection in that way, then my supervisor felt secure enough to just put her foot down and be like, absolutely not, this is not what we do. And then I was doubly lucky the next year when I went to work at a different camp, and the camp director there sat me down on the third day of staff training and said, if you want to be out to your campers, I was a senior counselor or something that year. If you want to be out to your campers, that would be great, because your gay campers are really gonna need a role model in their lives. And once again, I was lucky. That was not a normal thing to be happening in 2001 at all. So yeah, so I had an incredible amount of luck. A luck too that when I came up to my parents, they were like, honey, we could have told you when you were 12, give us a hug. Now we got to go to dinner. We're going to be we know it's important to you, but we love you. We'll talk next weekend. That was that was literally the words that came out of their mouth, which was kind of what I needed to hear right then. Great, it doesn't bother us. We love you. This is who you are. We got to go. So lucky. I was so lucky. Lucky in my life that I felt supported. Lucky that I could continue in camping. And we don't think kids should have to be lucky. So I think that was the roundabout way of why we started it. Is kids shouldn't have to be lucky. Kids should be able to access programs and not have to rely on luck to feel safe and supported and seen for their true selves. So I guess that's the vision. We have a vision statement on our website, and it's all about intention. But I think that's the big thing: is no one should have to rely on luck to be safe and seen.
That
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
I was just going to say I'd really echo that. I think my experience as a camper and as a staff member was, there was nothing that was outwardly hostile or anything like that, but there was a very deep-rooted, very heteronormative culture at that camp that, I don't think anyone was intentionally contributing to. And I think if you asked anyone there, do you think a queer staff member would feel safe here? They'd be like, yeah, absolutely, we're so nice. But everyone is contributing to, again, this really deep-seated cultural issue that, I think everyone just imagined was not there because we were never doing anything actively harmful. So again, I think part of this as well is that, this understanding that because a camp is doing nothing proactively, that doesn't make that safe space, and that doesn't make something like a neutral setting because nothing harmful is being actively done that they're aware of. And that to truly make that space, it does require that intention, and it requires folks to be proactive and consider the experiences of campers as well as staff members.
Absolutely. I like to think that there's a difference between allowing people to just wander into a space and welcoming people and celebrating them when they walk in. And I think those are two very different experiences. And intention versus impact as well, right? Like we can intend to do something, but the impact can be very different. When we think of, or when you think back on your last 3 years of pride camping, that's both a lot of time and not very much time at all. I'm curious as to what have been some of your successes, and were people as excited about this as you had hoped, or as you had expected? Davin, I'll turn to you first.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of successes that we've been having consistently, I'd say since we first started, has been like conferences and ways that we've been able to connect with people who are interested in having conversations with us and learning and contributing their own experiences as well. I think right from when we started, like that was something we really hit the ground running with, was starting with training and starting with helping some, foundational policies that camps can start taking on. And yeah, there was definitely a very large appetite for this sort of discussion and inclusion for 2S LGBTQ plus identities in camp settings. And yeah, really, we've been thrilled with the number of connections we've been able to make doing those conferences and connecting with people in that way. I would say, yeah, people were very excited when we started for many different reasons. A lot of folks wanting to contribute, a lot of folks that are just saying like, I know nothing about this, but I think this is so important, and I'm like so excited to hear more. And really, we did a lot of sort of needs assessments and things like that when we first started, and I think a lot of those sort of ideas and conversations we had initially with those folks really helped sort of form what pride camping has ended up looking like today, and how we sort of got to this point.
I recall being at Tri-State and you folks had t-shirts and everybody wanted one of those. So I consider that to be one of your probably very small successes, but they were very popular, and I still aim to acquire one at some point in my life.
We have t-shirts available.
Wow, well, perfect. Right after this, we'll chat about t-shirts, Amanda. From your perspective, Amanda, what have been some of the successes?
Yeah, I think that one of the big successes, has, like Davin has said, is like being able to connect with other organizations. I also think I like to think that we've helped like move the industry along in a way that we might not necessarily be cognizant of, and like maybe I'm taking credit where credit's not due, but the way people talk about 2S LGBTQ plus inclusion, like in summer camps professionals Facebook group, the number of sessions that, like, we used to be the only people talking about 2S LGBTQ plus inclusion at conferences, and now we're getting turned away because there's other organizations, which is great. And I think part of that is just like the industry was ready to move. But I also like to think a little bit we like open the door for folks to be like, well, if they're doing it, I can do it better, which is great. If people can do it better or different, that's wonderful. So I think that's something we've really seen a change in the last 2 years in particular, like a lot more people organizing and being active. Yeah, and just also I think the number of folks that people that aren't members of the 2S LGBTQ plus community coming up after sessions or talking to us and saying like, I've been running my family's camp for the last 40 years, and this is the first trans camper we've had. And then I took your session and I realized this is the first trans camper we knew we had, but we've had other trans campers and we need to do better. And thank you. So seeing those folks that like really want to be allies, but didn't know they weren't being allies or didn't know how to start. And I think someone else on the board of directors, Heather, said the only people that benefit from a neutral space are those who have privilege already. So kind of getting folks to think about the fact that it's not a neutral space. It's never a neutral space. So how are we going to make sure we're being true allies in the sense of the word?
Oh, I really like that. I hadn't considered that before, so thank you for sharing that. And I do think that the industry has come a long way, and it's not at all to say that the work is done, because I think everyone can agree there's always going to be more work to do. But I know Travis Allison likes to say a rising tide raises all ships, and so it takes brave folks to sort of chart the course and to be the first ones to go down this path. But I think there certainly has been a shift at conferences, which is fabulous.
I always get, a sense of like maybe not overwhelmed, but of whelm when we see so much coming into the industry that's new, that's helping educate people and help them grow as humans as well. So, but as much as we all have successes, what were some of the stumbles or the challenges you came up with or came across in this journey?
Yeah, I think we hit conference season like really at a good clip, and then the end of conference season rolls around and we have all these great ideas and people are engaged, and then stuff happens at our own camps that we have to deal with, and hiring is intense. And I think 2 years ago we came out of Tri-State with some big ideas, and we didn't really we didn't convert on a lot of those, and we were worried last year about going in and like disappointing people again. And then on my flight home from Tri-State, the borders were shut down because of COVID. So not that COVID's to blame, but I think that has kind of been a recurring stumbling, is like figuring out how to balance the excitement we get out of conference season with the fact that it happens right before everyone's big workload happens. Yeah. And to go along with that, because of that, I think we lost some opportunities to like partner with folks that we have talked with at conferences, and then just never found the capacity to be able to actually engage with them in a meaningful and thoughtful way. And that's something that I regret. And looking back, I would have a better plan of how to like carry that momentum through conference season, barring another pandemic.
Yeah, and I think to build on that a little bit, I think at first we didn't realize exactly in terms of like the timeline, what sort of, the frequency of like inquiries and things like that we'd be getting. I think we assumed that, when folks get busy for the summer season is when, we're going to be getting like the most questions and, most consultations and things like that. When really it was actually sort of the opposite, that, I think the frequency of these things were happening during, conference season and, that period after summer has ended, but everyone's like taken like 2 weeks in September to, get their lives back together. And yeah, I think the sort of timeline that we anticipated, we would be doing a lot for Pride camping and supporting others was actually quite different than what we expected.
And a little bit similar to folks that like sit on camping board of directors or do other work in like camping spheres. We found that when people really need support was when we were the busiest too. So not having a good plan of how that would look, I think is like the main challenge we face, and something we need to post-pandemic we need to talk about.
I mean, Cass and I often talk about the toll that the pandemic takes on all of us. So I don't think that's an excuse so much as it is just a very harsh reality that we're in. And I smiled when you said barring another pandemic, because I really hope that this is the last one for quite some time. That's a different discussion. So I wasn't laughing at the seriousness of that statement, just hopeful that there wouldn't be another one anytime soon. I also think, wouldn't it be nice if there was like a how-to guide on how to start your own camping association? But maybe I'll add that to your project list for down the road.
Yeah. And like, so the pandemic, like last year we came out of Tri-State and like in 2020, and a camp had offered us, like, you can host a conference next year in June for free. We'll volunteer. We'll like take care of the food, like no cost to you. We'll figure out how to get people there. It was like a camp that serves the community, and there's just this feeling that like, let's make it accessible to everyone, and like we have this resource. And then like we were just feeling so great, and then the pandemic hit, and that camp didn't operate. Like clearly we weren't going to like do international travel for a conference, right? Like it's just kind of, it's the pandemic in some respects has been great, right? Because people, in theory, some people have more time, some people are online more, so can like learn more about things that aren't necessarily happening in their physical sphere that they would see all the time. But it has really slowed down connections, particularly in this space, I think, in a way that might be detrimental, like might set things back for a couple of years, unfortunately. Or maybe not. Maybe I should be more hopeful about the community. But I know the 2S LGBT community has been hit particularly hard. Lots of campers and lots of staff who like their safe spaces, that camp, the place where they like use the pronouns they use, that like had deep value and meaning to them in those spaces, and now they don't have that anymore. And that's something that is like concerning, and like something we probably need to think about going forward, how we can support folks in dealing with, this mental health and social integration issues that all this isolation has caused.
Absolutely, the loss of community has been huge, and for sure the 2S LGBTQ plus community is one of those that has suffered. And so we do hope that we're able to come through the pandemic and able to gather again. And I look forward to hearing more details about that conference in the future. This conversation has been great so far. We're going to take a quick pause here for our ad break, and then we will be right back to dive in more with Amanda and Davin.
Inequitable access to professional development doesn't only impact the Camp Pro trying to increase their knowledge, but ultimately the children and adults they serve. This is why ACA Illinois is committed to providing free to low-cost professional development programs each year, because every child deserves to attend a camp where the director has the best training, no matter their camp's financial situation. We know that camp pros always want better for themselves, their camps, their staff, and ultimately their campers. That's why we are so grateful to ACA Illinois for ensuring training and professional development resources that are affordable and accessible to all camp pros. During the pandemic, ACA Illinois has been a fantastic resource for professional development for camp professionals during what has been a challenging time for many of us. As we've both shared, we've spent some time of this past year, almost over a year ago now, furloughed or laid off, and so grateful to be able to access trainings like these and the resources at an affordable rate as we stay connected to the camp industry. As we continue on in this current state of the world, ACA Illinois is committed to ensuring that financial barriers don't hinder access to trainings for staff. They recognize that this past year has presented innumerable financial barriers, and they don't want those to get in the way of training or professional development. After all, they want your campers to have the best camp experience possible. And we all know that well-trained staff deliver better camp programs. Elevate your camp and your career at acail.org.
So looking down the road, we're going to pick up this conversation where we left off. So we were chatting a little bit about the pandemic, but eventually the pandemic is going to end. The lights are going to turn back on in the world. We're going to move on. Let's think the future, 5-10 years down the road. What's the goal of this association? And Amanda, I'll start with you. In 5 years, what do you hope to see for this association?
Yeah, I think, so one of the things we talked about when we first started this association was have it function like a true camping association, where there's an accreditation program, and families and staff and kids can be fairly confident if they went to a camp that was accredited by the Pride Camping Association, that it would be, nothing can be a truly safe space, but like, there'll be intention in the program in terms of inclusion, and there'll be thoughtful processes to deal with things that arise. And that's still the goal. That is in theory the goal for next year, to have there will be standards that we're the plan is to have standards that are available for free for folks to trial this year, and then for us to launch like a membership accreditation process for next year, so that in 2022 camps can say they've been accredited by the Pride Camping Association. So that's a fairly big tangible goal, and like I think that will necessitate. Right now we're geographically a little bit constrained to Canada and the northeastern United States, just because that's the conferences we've been at basically, and that's where we have our connections. But eventually there'll be a necessity to like be some more thoughtful and intentional reaching out to other areas of like North America to be able to be more like support. And I can't provide the support for like a Latinx camp in Texas. I just don't know enough about. I can do some stuff, but I don't know about the culture and like the challenges facing those people in that and those communities to be as thoughtful support as like we would hope, right? So I guess 5 years down the road, we would be looking at having folks across North America who are able to support local organizations to be more intentional about inclusion.
That's incredible. And I mean, to create an accreditation program is no easy feat by any means. That's a huge undertaking when I think of just process to review. Like some standards every year can be massive. Cassie and I are both involved in our provincial camping association, and Cassie, I know that you can join me in saying that it's not an easy feat by any means.
Yeah, I like grateful that I don't sit on that committee. Because the amount of work those people put in to create standards, update standards, keep them up to date, adjust them,
and
check
those are
grammar.
that already exist. So
yeah, those exist, and like just the sheer amount of work to put into creating something from scratch and then keep it up and update it as everything shifts and adjusts and things need to be updated. Thank you.
Absolutely. Davin, what about you in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I really add on to what Amanda has said in terms of being able to provide member value. And accreditation is definitely a big part of our vision. But I think building that membership base and being able to do what our membership wants us to do, and to be able to follow up with the things that are pressing, and the things that are being brought up, and the things that people are experiencing in their camps and within their programs, to be able to support them in whatever means is necessary, and sort of have the capacity to do so, I think is the great end goal in my mind.
So to keep going on as we look into the future, let's start with Davin on this one. If you had unlimited resources, whether that was time, money, or skills, what would you do with the association?
Yeah, I would say honestly, I'm sure Amanda would agree that if we could have any of these resources, time is a big one. Money is nice. We could definitely do a lot of wonderful things with that. But I think, from the beginning, we've had some really ambitious ideas and ambitious projects. And, Amanda and I, as well as the rest of the board of directors, we're all volunteers, and we have full-time jobs. We call our regular jobs our day jobs, and we like to call this our night job. But we only have so much time, and I think having some dedicated time to be able to work on this, and follow up on a lot of our ideas is really what's super essential. Like we said, there's been so much interest in being able to support and being able to volunteer, and people asking how they can help. So in terms of skills and the person power to achieve those things, we have plenty of that. It's, I think, the larger pieces in terms of organization and getting things set up to be able to pass things on to others, and set up the committees we want to do, is really what we need more time for.
Excellent. So the hard question to follow that, if you had the money to pay the person to help you do that, would you do so?
Yeah,
Oh,
100%.
absolutely.
Excellent.
I was gonna say that like we don't like, you know, we don't charge for most of our things. Like sometimes we do if we're like, oh, we should really get the Zoom webinar for this month to run that thing, right? And no one involved or has offered help has like really cared about being financially compensated. But we would like if we could have money to pay someone to like do that organization and like coordinate or manage the day-to-day of it, respond to emails. Right now I'm really bad at responding to emails in like a timely fashion at all. So if you're listening to this and you send me an email, I'm working on it, team. But like that kind of thing is certainly would be beneficial and is not just for us, but like for the people that are asking for support, right? We only have so much time in the day and like emotional capacity in the day. And to have someone who's like their job to do that, I think would be a big benefit. Yeah.
I mean, having lots of volunteers is fabulous, but the organization of volunteers, it takes a lot of time, more time than you think. I'm often like, oh yeah, I'll just rally a group of people, and I'm like, oh, but now I have to like communicate my vision and delegate and follow up and all that as well.
Yeah, totally agree. Just like it eats away at time too, like trying to do all that stuff. You're like, oh, that'll take me 2 minutes, and 20 minutes later, you're still working on it. So if you're one of those people that, you know, has some resources to help them out, I'm going to ask for them right now.
Yeah, and some time. The thing is, we're kind of at this like at a crossroads where like once we get the standards out and once we get an accreditation process and start charging money for that, like the idea is for it to be fairly nominal, but to like cover our costs, then like we would have money to pay someone to do some of that work. But we're slowed down in getting there because we don't have someone. And as we've been working on the standards, like we've engaged a group of fantastic volunteers and like they worked pretty consistently for a month. And then we're at this stage where we need to do, you know, final review and bring a group back together. And even though there's people eager to do that, we're like stuck finding the capacity to do the middle step, right? So yeah, having someone that has the time and the space to do it, that would be a big help. And then we could pay them in a year. I mean, we should pay them now. We really should pay them now, but we don't have any money.
I mean, you said that you have day jobs and night jobs being pride camping, but I also assume that you like have families or lives or I was gonna say social lives, but like social lives on Zoom because we're in a pandemic. But you have like things that you want to fill your time with other than your two jobs, as well, I assume.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old and like a wonderful spouse. And yeah, they take up a lot of time because I want them to take up a lot of time, right? I spend my weekends hanging out with them, and my wife is a nurse. So her schedule is like not super consistent. So it's not uncommon to not have her home for the weekend. So when we are all together, we really try to spend the time doing like outdoorsy stuff. But yeah, so we have 3 jobs, really.
Fair enough. You've spoken a lot about how folks are really interested in pride camping, and you both touched on the importance of allies earlier on, but I thought we could dive into that a little bit more, and I'm curious as to how folks can be good allies to pride camping. Davin, do you have any thoughts on that? Because I think the word ally is tossed around a lot, but without intention, it be a little bit lackluster, let's say.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think we do, again, a lot of folks reaching out to us and wanting to pick our brains or, you know, have us consult on a certain situation that they're experiencing. And, you know, we only have so much capacity to do that. And the more we, you know, do that sort of thing, that, you know, is taking away from, again, the greater organization that we need to do, and the follow-up we need to do from an association level. So, you know, we are looking into starting to do some more kind of professional consulting on that level. So the folks that are looking for that as more of a paid service, and again, that's a way that we can support the people who need that support, and be able to use that and channel that back through the association to, again, eventually have someone that can tackle a lot of the admin side of things and really help progress what we're trying to do. At the same time, you know, we are always looking to connect with more people. So even little things like connecting with us on social media and sharing what we're doing on social media with your circles, tagging us even in the summer camp professionals Facebook group when someone has a question that we might be able to answer, tagging us and letting us either get in there or connecting someone with resources we may already have. And like Amanda has mentioned, we do have merchandise available on our website, again, all of which goes back towards Pride Camping Association.
That's fabulous. I like that those are really tangible ways of how to be an ally. Because I think often folks are like, how can I be an ally? What does that look like? And those are some steps. Amanda, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think what we could really, we've been quite fortunate in having people offer to sit on the board, offer to be involved in discrete jobs or offer to hey, I want to get involved, but because of the way our post-conference season has gone, we've never really been able to capitalize on that. But someone that could be an ally if they've got can dedicate 5 hours a week to doing social media or helping to organize emails or those really basic admin tasks would be lovely and a big help, and not just for us. I think Davin and I are both really really driven to have an impact, not so that everyone loves Pride camping, that's not it, right? We want people to be able to see our social media and learn something from it, be oh, I can be a better ally because I read this thing that was shared on social media, or I know more and I can help my campers more, right? And because of our capacity constraints, that has kind of fallen by the wayside. So yeah, if someone has can consistently dedicate time to some super exciting social media and super boring answering emails, that would be a big help now. And then also in terms of being an ally, just doing research, right? You can be an ally to Pride camping by being an ally to the 2S LGBT plus community. So, if you're running a camp or running a program anywhere, going to your local 2S LGBTQ plus center and seeing if they have programs you can access, seeing if you can pay for it to have them and come do training, right? It's not necessarily about us, but how you can support the community is being involved and asking how you can support your local organizations.
Awesome. Well, for folks who heard it here first, Pride Camping is looking for some dedicated volunteers, so you can reach out to Amanda and Davin after this. If you are interested in the super exciting combo of exciting social media and boring emails, apparently maybe they could be exciting though. Who knows?
They're actually probably quite exciting. I just haven't gotten to them all yet, so I'm gonna change that. It's all exciting. It's all exciting.
All exciting. All around exciting at Pride Camping Association. Cassie, over to you.
Yeah, it's just all so exciting. I actually have a question that kind of goes a little off topic. You mentioned getting involved with your local communities and being involved to be an ally. Where can people find resources for that so that they can get involved with their local communities? I know this is kind of a spur of the moment,
yeah,
hey.
I know it's a great question. I think it really depends. I mean, most mid-sized cities in North America, small to mid-sized cities, have a Pride Center of some description. Even small towns that have colleges, community colleges or colleges and universities in them, those colleges and universities would most likely have some kind of center they could access. So that's kind of probably your best starting point. Sometimes whether rightly or wrongly, 2S LGBT inclusion and community programs are paired with sexual health programs. And there's a deep history of why that happens and whether it's beneficial to continue like that. But if you don't know what to type into your search engine, you could type sexual health and wellness in the name of the city you're in, and that might be a good entry point to finding a local organization. Yeah, or you could search for local camps as well. If you write us an email, we'll answer it eventually and see if we can help you.
Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna put together a one-pager for our show notes to add to everybody's resources. But we're getting close to running out of time. So very quickly, maybe we'll get Amanda to get us started. How has the goal of the Pride Camping Association evolved from where it was initially to kind of where you are now?
I don't know if the goal has evolved so much, but how we're getting there necessarily, how we're like I think we're being more thoughtful. Like we talk about intention all the time, but I think we're actually being more thoughtful than we were in terms of like how we're creating standards and how we're engaging with the communities, where before, part of it, because there wasn't a lot of, groups in this space, we would put together a thing and do it, and like, be like, here's the best practice policy we have. And now I think we're being more careful to, reach out to other organizations and other people to get input. So I think the way we're doing it is working. I'm sure that it is changing. I'm sure the goal will change. I mean, it's really been, with this pandemic garbage, it's really been 2 years. So I think the goal is still to like support 2S LGBTQ campers, families, staff, and volunteers. But how we're getting there is shifting a little bit.
Yeah, I would say early on, there was sort of this vision of like a perfect, inclusive rainbow camp that will be the exemplar for all. And I think as we continued our conversations and met with more people and heard their stories, I think, again, it's not that the goal has changed, but just sort of the way we get there, and sort of adapting a bit to be able to support camps where they're at, and sort of help them take the steps that make the most sense for them, sort of where they are now and in that moment. And trying not to overwhelm with every wonderful, perfect, inclusive thing a camp can be. And again, talking about what is realistic for this camp, what is something that this camp can afford, what is something that their board of directors or their stakeholders or the community is going to not backlash at. So I think, again, the goal ultimately is still the same, but I think we've definitely found some more nuance in how we get there. And then the other piece as well, we are trying our best to incorporate as much anti-racism and support of BIPOC folks and all of the different realms that interconnect in a lot of different ways with 2S LGBTQ plus identities, and really create a lot of unique identities and situations and life experiences that aren't reflected when you just look through that single lens of 2S LGBTQ identities. So that is something that is really present for us, and something we're trying to incorporate into everything we're doing.
Yeah, I think that, like, to best describe it, my friend Andrea and I, who worked at camps like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, used to talk about the shovel of reality. And the shovel of reality was like, you have your first year counseling director, a section director, and they're like, I'm going to be the best counseling director ever. Like, I'm going to bring ice cream to my counselors at the end of like each session, and they're going to love me, and like the kids are going to be marvelous and all this thing. And then like 2 weeks in, they just kind of walk into the office days like they've been hit over the head with a shovel. And they're like, I can barely keep up. Right. And I think we've recently been hit with the shovel of reality of like how, we had a great idea, we were really passionate about it. We're like, this is going to be snap. We're going to get people on our side, and like people are on our side, but the actual doing the work bit, we got shoveled a little bit, I think, which is, I don't know, that happens, right? We're going to move forward, but I think that has, that's kind of the biggest shift, is like, how are we actually going to get where we're going?
Absolutely. Well, that ties in very well to our last question as we wrap up here today. Very quickly, we'll give you each 1 or 2 sentences to describe what advice would you give to somebody who wanted to start their own association. Davin, we'll start with you.
Say, flesh out that vision and that mission and what you're trying to achieve from the get-go, and make sure that is ultimately reflecting, your end goal and what it is you're trying to achieve, as that will definitely help with the confusion and the missteps, and when there's so much happening all at once at the beginning, you can use that to sort of ground ground all that chaos into, again, what you're trying to achieve.
Amazing. Amanda?
Yeah, a similar thing, like take some time to figure out like where you want to go and be able to speak passionately about it, and people will hop on board if you're passionate about it, and you can sell what, like, if you can explain where you want to go, people will come with you, and then be open to what that looks like, right? It might look totally different than what how you thought you would get there, but if you're mission driven and have the goal in mind, I find you're more open to, like, doing those detours along the way.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. It sounds like it's a journey and a process, and that you got to do some hard stuff like any good camp professional has to do. We do the hard stuff. And I love that shovel of reality. My goodness, I think I was there last week. I think it hit me. But thank you again for joining us Beyond Camp. As we wrap up, Amanda and Davin, can you share how our listeners can connect with you?
Yeah, certainly. So pridecamping.org is where we are on the internet, and then at Pride Camping on both Instagram and Facebook, that other one, are the best ways to get a hold of us. Please be gentle with our response time. But the website has great resources. So as Davin mentioned earlier, sample policies, training resources, almost every session we've ever presented at a conference is there, either the slide deck or in some cases the video of it, including like lesson plans for doing staff training and that kind of stuff. And don't be scared to buy a t-shirt or some stickers. They look good. We make very little money on them, but it pays for our Zoom and our internet. So that'd be great.
Amazing. Thank you. We will put all of that in our show notes as well for everybody. So thank you to everybody for joining us beyond camp. We hope that you were able to connect and reflect with us as we journey beyond the property lines and bring camp with us. As we continue to wrap up, we want you to be able to reach out and connect with us. So you can reach myself, Cassie, at cassie.bloy@stefanricard.ca. Rachel?
Folks are always welcome to send me an email at kentar@girlguides.ca.
Don't forget to check out our show notes at gocamp.pro/beyondcamp. Another big thank you goes to Amanda and Davin for joining us today from the Pride Camping Association, to the team at Go Camp Pro for continuing to hold space for us to have these conversations, to ACA Illinois for their sponsorship and support of us, to our producers, Matt and Jotham, for taking the time to edit all of our last minute things recently. And to you, our listeners, your dedication allows us to keep moving forward. Beyond Camp is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network. Check out all our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcasts. Go well and safely, friends. We'll see you next week.